In a city ruled by fear, where a single glance from the wrong man could end your life, one woman dared to look away. Lorenzo Moretti wasn't just a billionaire. He was the king of the underworld, a man who commanded silence just by walking into a room. Women threw themselves at his feet, and men trembled at his shadow. But on a rainy Tuesday night at the most exclusive club in Manhattan, a tired waitress named Clara did the unthinkable. She didn't bow. She didn't tremble. She simply ignored him. It was a mistake that should have cost her everything. Instead, it sparked an obsession that would burn the city to the ground. This is the story of the waitress who tamed the beast, and the dark secret she was hiding that terrified even the Mafia itself. The Obsidian Lounge was not a place for the faint of heart, nor was it a place for the poor. It was a sanctuary of velvet, crystal, and blood money, tucked away in the beating heart of New York City's meatpacking district. The air inside always smelled of expensive cigars, vintage leather, and the distinct metallic scent of fear masked by heavy cologne. Clara adjusted her apron, the fabric scratching against her waist. Her feet throbbed in her cheap black flats. It was 1:00 a.m., and she had been on her feet since noon. She wasn't impressed by the clientele. To her, they were just suits with wallets, men who thought ordering a $5,000 bottle of whiskey made them gods. She was clearing a table near the back, wiping down the mahogany surface with practiced efficiency, when the atmosphere in the room shifted. It wasn't a sound. It was a sudden drop in pressure. The ambient chatter died instantly. The clinking of glasses stopped. Even the live jazz band seemed to lower their volume, the saxophone whimpering into a soft hum. Clara didn't look up. She just wanted to finish her shift, collect her tips, and get home to her younger sister Maya, who was waiting for her insulin medication. "He's here," whispered Julian, the bartender, his face draining of color as he polished a glass with trembling hands. "Don't look him in the eye, Clara. Whatever you do." Clara dipped her rag into the sanitizer bucket. "Who?" "Lorenzo Moretti." The name meant nothing to her personal life, but everything to the city. Lorenzo Moretti was the capo dei capi, the head of the Moretti crime family. He owned half the police force, 3/4 of the judges, and every inch of the concrete beneath their feet. He was 32, lethally handsome, and known for a temper that could level buildings. The door swung open. 6 men in tailored tactical suits entered first, scanning the room like predators. Then Lorenzo walked in. He was tall, wearing a charcoal Brioni suit that cost more than Clara's entire life earnings. His hair was dark, swept back, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He didn't walk. He prowled. He took a seat at the VIP booth, center stage, without looking at anyone. He expected the world to revolve around him. The manager, a sweating man named Mr. Henderson, rushed over, bowing low. "Mr. Moretti, an honor." "The usual." Lorenzo didn't speak. He just lifted one finger. Mr. Henderson scrambled back to the bar. "Clara, you take the VIP table. Julian is shaking too much." Clara sighed. "Fine." She grabbed her tray, balanced a bottle of sparkling water and a crystal glass on it, and walked towards the booth. She wasn't shaking. She was exhausted. There was a difference. When she reached the table, Lorenzo was looking at his phone, scrolling through messages that likely dictated the fate of millions of dollars. He didn't acknowledge her. "Sparkling water, sir," Clara said, her voice flat. She placed the glass down. Lorenzo didn't look up. He simply tapped the empty glass with his ring, a heavy gold signet ring. Clink, clink. It was a command. Pour. Clara felt a spark of irritation. She wasn't a servant. She was a waitress. There was a protocol, but there was also basic human decency. She unscrewed the cap and poured the water. Then Lorenzo did it. Without looking at her, he snapped his fingers and pointed to a spot of condensation on the table. Snap! Snap! It was the way one would summon a dog. Clara paused. She looked at his hand, then at his face. He was still looking at his phone, arrogant, dismissive, expecting her to rush forward and wipe the droplet instantly. At that exact moment, an elderly couple at the table next to the VIP booth dropped a fork. The old woman struggled to bend down to pick it up. Clara made a choice. She turned her back on Lorenzo Moretti. She walked 2 steps to the elderly woman, smiled warmly, and crouched down. "Let me get that for you, Mom. I'll bring you a fresh one." The silence in the room became deafening. The bodyguards standing around Lorenzo stiffened, their hands drifting toward their jackets. Mr. Henderson, watching from the bar, looked like he was having a stroke. Lorenzo's finger stopped scrolling. For 10 seconds, no one breathed. Clara helped the woman, retrieved a clean fork, and placed it gently on the table. Only then did she turn back to the VIP booth. Lorenzo was looking at her now. His phone was face down on the table. His steel eyes were locked onto hers with an intensity that would have made a lesser woman faint. He looked baffled, shocked. And then, slowly, a dark, terrifying amusement curled the corner of his lip. "You," Lorenzo said. His voice was deep, a velvet rumble that vibrated in her chest. Clara met his gaze. "Yes, sir. Was there something else?" "I gave you an order," he said softly, "and you helped them." "They needed help," Clara said, her face impassive. "You had a wet spot on a table. I figured the man who owns the city could handle a drop of water until I was done." The bodyguard behind Lorenzo stepped forward, his face twisting in rage. "You little Lorenzo held up a hand. The guard froze. Lorenzo stood up slowly, towering over her. He leaned in close, smelling of sandalwood and danger. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes," Clara said, checking her watch. "You're the guy in table 4 who hasn't ordered any food yet. Kitchen closes in 20 minutes. She turned around and walked away. She didn't run. She walked. She went to the bar, grabbed a refill for another table, and continued her shift. Lorenzo stood there, watching her retreating figure. The anger in his chest was there, burning hot, but beneath it was something he hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. He sat back down, picked up his drink, and took a sip. "Silas," he said to his head of security. "Boss?" Silas asked, hand on his earpiece. "Do you want us to handle her? Teach her a lesson?" Lorenzo watched Clara laughing with the elderly couple, her smile transforming her tired face into something radiant. "No," Lorenzo murmured. "She's the first person in 5 years to tell me no. It's intoxicating." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. "We're leaving." "Leaving, sir, but we just got here." "I've seen enough," Lorenzo said, walking toward the exit. "Get the car ready. And Silas?" "Yes, boss?" "Find out where she lives, and bring her to me." Clara's shift ended at 3 a.m. Her feet felt like they were bleeding, and her tips were abysmal. The encounter with the rude billionaire had ruined the mood of the club, and people had tipped poorly in the tense atmosphere. She pushed open the heavy metal back door of the club, stepping out into the alleyway. It was raining, a cold, biting New York drizzle. She pulled her thin cardigan tighter around her shoulders and started walking toward the subway station. She kept her head down, counting the cracks in the pavement. She needed to buy Maya's insulin tomorrow. She was short by $50. Maybe she could pawn her mother's locket. The thought made her stomach twist, but she had no choice. She didn't hear the car approach. It was a whisper of an engine, a high-end electric hum. One moment she was alone in the alley. The next, a matte black Cadillac Escalade blocked her path. Clara stopped. She instinctively reached into her purse for her pepper spray, her heart hammering against her ribs. 2 doors opened. 2 men stepped out. They were huge, wearing dark raincoats that didn't conceal the bulk of shoulder holsters. "Clara Vance?" the first man asked. It wasn't a question. "Who's asking?" Clara said, backing up slowly. "Mr. Moretti requests your company," the man said. "Requests?" Clara scoffed, despite the fear rising in her throat. "It's 3 a.m. Tell Mr. Moretti I'm off the clock." She tried to sidestep them, but the second man moved with blurring speed. He grabbed her arm, not roughly, but with a grip like iron. "It wasn't a request, Miss Vance," the man said. "Let go of me!" Clara shouted, stomping on his foot. The man didn't even flinch. He just opened the back door of the SUV. "Please, don't make this difficult. He's not a patient man." Clara looked around. The alley was empty. The rain was falling harder. She calculated her odds. 2 men, likely armed, versus 1 exhausted waitress with a can of pepper spray. If she fought, they would hurt her. If she got hurt, she couldn't work. If she couldn't work, Maya died. The logic was cold and simple. "Fine," Clara spat. She shook her arm free and climbed into the car herself. "But if I'm not back by 6 a.m. to give my sister her shots, I will burn his house down." The men exchanged a look of bewildered amusement before slamming the door. The interior of the car was warmer than her apartment. The leather seats were soft. Clara sat stiffly, refusing to lean back. She stared out the tinted window as the city blurred by. They weren't heading to a warehouse or a dock. They were heading uptown, toward the billionaires' row. She wasn't trembling. That was the strange thing. Clara had seen darkness before. She had grown up in a household that made the Mafia look like a debate club. Her father had been a gambler with a penchant for borrowing from the wrong people. She had learned early that showing fear was the quickest way to get eaten. The car slowed down and pulled into the underground garage of the Penthouse 432 building, the tallest residential tower in the hemisphere. "We're here," the driver said. They escorted her to a private elevator. There were no buttons, just a retinal scanner. The guard scanned his eye, and the doors slid open. The elevator shot up, ears popping as they ascended 70 stories in seconds. The doors opened directly into a living room that was larger than Clara's entire apartment block. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire Manhattan skyline, glittering like diamonds on black velvet. A fireplace the size of a car roared in the center. And there he was. Lorenzo Moretti stood by the window, holding a glass of amber liquid. He had removed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and inked with faint, intricate tattoos. He turned around. The room was silent. "You came," he said, his voice low. "I was kidnapped," Clara corrected, crossing her arms over her chest. "There's a distinction." Lorenzo smirked. He walked toward her, the sound of his footsteps absorbed by the plush Persian rug. "I prefer the term summoned. Would you like a drink?" "I want to go home." "In time," Lorenzo said. He circled her, inspecting her like she was a rare piece of art he was considering buying. "You intrigued me tonight, Clara. No one ignores me." "Maybe you need better friends," she snapped. The guards by the elevator winced. No one spoke to the Don like that. Lorenzo stopped in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his grey eyes. "Why aren't you afraid? Most women in your position would be crying. Begging." Clara looked up at him, her chin high. "Mr. Moretti, I work double shifts 6 days a week to pay for medication that costs 300% more than it should. My landlord threatens to evict me every month. I walk home through neighborhoods where gunshots are background noise. You think a man in a fancy suit scares me? You're just another rich guy with an ego problem. I deal with 3 of you every night. You just tip better." Lorenzo stared at her. His expression shifted from amusement to something sharper. Respect. "You think I'm just a rich guy?" he whispered. "Aren't you?" Lorenzo laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "I could buy the building you live in and demolish it while you sleep. I could have you erased from existence before the sun comes up." "Then do it," Clara challenged, stepping closer rather than backing away. "Because if you're not going to kill me, you're wasting my time, and I have things to do." For the first time in his life, Lorenzo Moretti was speechless. He looked at her worn-out shoes, her messy bun, the fire in her eyes. He felt a sudden, violent urge to possess that fire, to cup it in his hands and see if it burned him. "You have a debt," Lorenzo said suddenly. Clara blinked. "What?" "Your father," Lorenzo said. "Marcus Vance. He died 3 years ago, leaving behind a debt of $50,000 to the Romanovs, a debt that, unbeknownst to you, has been accruing interest." Clara's face went pale. The bravado slipped, just for a second. "How do you know that?" "I know everything," Lorenzo said smoothly. "The Romanos are losing patience. They plan to collect next week. Not from your father, obviously, but from his next of kin." He pulled a file from the table and tossed it in front of her. It was a photo of her sister, Maya, walking to school. Clara felt the blood drain from her body. The air left her lungs. "If you touch her—" "I won't," Lorenzo said. "But the Romanos will. Unless—" "Unless what?" Clara hissed. "Unless you belong to me." The silence in the penthouse was heavy, suffocating. The fire crackled, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. Clara stared at the photo of Maya, her little sister, her only reason for breathing. She looked up at Lorenzo. The attraction she had felt earlier, the undeniable pull of his dark charisma, was gone, replaced by cold hatred. "What do you mean, belong to you?" she asked, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Lorenzo took a sip of his whiskey. "I need a wife, Clara." Clara blinked, certain she had misheard him. "Excuse me?" "My position," Lorenzo began, pacing slowly, "is under threat. The Commission, the governing body of the families, believes I am too volatile to lead without a tether. They want me married to a traditional Italian girl from one of the rival families to secure a peace treaty, specifically the daughter of the Sartini family." He grimaced, as if the name tasted like poison. "If I marry a Sartini, they will kill me in my sleep within a year and take my territory. I need a wife who is unconnected to this world, someone who owes me, someone I can control." "You can't control me," Clara said instantly. Lorenzo smiled. "That is exactly why I picked you. You have a spine. If I marry a weakling, the wolves will eat her alive. You might actually survive." He placed his hands on the table, leaning in. "Here is the deal. You marry me. We stay married for 1 year. In exchange, I pay off your father's debt to the Romanos immediately. I provide the best medical care in the world for your sister's condition. And after 1 year, we divorce. You walk away with $5 million and a clean slate." Clara's mind was racing. $5 million. Maya's debt gone, the Romanos gone. It was everything she had ever prayed for. But the cost was selling her soul to the devil. "And if I say no?" "Then I open the door," Lorenzo said, gesturing to the elevator. "You leave, and next week, when the Romanos come for your sister, you deal with them on your own." It wasn't a choice. It was an execution disguised as a proposal. Clara looked at the photo of Maya again. She thought about the nights she held Maya while she cried from the pain, the fear of running out of insulin, the constant looking over her shoulder. She took a deep breath. She looked Lorenzo Moretti in the eye. "I have conditions," she said. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "You are in no position to negotiate." "I am if you want this to look real," Clara countered. "If I'm your wife, I'm not your prisoner. I work. I keep my job. Absolutely not. My wife doesn't wipe tables." "Then no deal," Clara said firmly. "I won't be a bird in a cage, Lorenzo. I keep my life. You just get to be part of it." Lorenzo stared at her. He calculated. He saw the stubborn set of her jaw. He realized that if he pushed too hard, she would break, and he needed her strong. "Fine," he growled. "But you will have bodyguards. Invisible but there." "Fine. And you move in here? Tonight?" "I need to pack. I need to explain to Maya." "My men will move your things. You tell Maya you got a promotion, a live-in management position." Clara felt a tear slip down her cheek. She wiped it away angrily. "You're a monster." "I'm a businessman, Clara," Lorenzo said, extending his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Clara looked at his large, scarred hand. She hesitated. Then, thinking of Maya, she reached out and grasped it. His skin was rough, hot. When their palms touched, a jolt of electricity shot up her arm, startling them both. Lorenzo's eyes widened slightly. "Deal," she whispered. "Good," Lorenzo said, not letting go of her hand. He pulled her slightly closer. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Moretti." Suddenly the elevator doors chimed. Silas, the head of security, burst into the room, his face pale. He had a gun in his hand. "Boss, get down!" Crash! The floor-to-ceiling window shattered into a million diamonds as a sniper round tore through the glass, embedding itself in the wall inches from Lorenzo's head. Clara screamed, dropping to the floor. "We're under attack!" Silas roared. "It's the Sartinis!" Lorenzo didn't panic. He moved with terrifying speed. He didn't dive for cover behind the sofa. He dove for Clara. He covered her body with his, shielding her from the rain of glass and bullets. "Stay down!" he shouted over the noise of automatic gunfire erupting from the streets below. Clara was pressed against the Persian rug, the heavy weight of the Mafia boss on top of her. She could feel his heart hammering against her back, not in fear, but in adrenaline. "You said you'd protect me," she screamed. "I am," Lorenzo growled, pulling a golden desert eagle from his waistband. He looked at her, his eyes wild. "Contract starts now, Clara. Try not to die on the first day." The world had turned into a blur of noise and violence. The shattering of the window was still ringing in Clara's ears as Lorenzo dragged her across the Persian rug. The air in the penthouse, once smelling of expensive leather and firewood, now reeked of ozone and drywall dust. "Move," Lorenzo commanded, hauling her to her feet. He kept his body positioned between her and the broken window, a human shield of muscle and bespoke tailoring. "My sister!" Clara screamed, stumbling as one of her cheap flats came off. She kicked the other one away, running barefoot over the glass-strewn floor. "If they know where you live, they know where she is." "Silas is already en route to her school," Lorenzo shouted over the roar of another gunshot that decimated a Ming vase near the entrance. "I told you, I handle everything. Now move." They reached the private elevator. Lorenzo slammed his palm against the emergency override. The doors hissed open, and he shoved her inside, spinning around to fire 3 shots back into the darkness of the penthouse. A shadow near the balcony dropped. The doors slid shut, sealing them in the steel box. Silence returned, abrupt and heavy. Clara slumped against the mirrored wall, her chest heaving. She looked at Lorenzo. The composed, arrogant billionaire was gone. In his place was a warrior. His hair was disheveled, his eyes were dilated. and there was a streak of blood running down his cheek from a flying shard of glass. He looked terrifying. He looked magnificent. "Are you hit?" he asked, his voice rough. He grabbed her shoulders, spinning her around, his hands patting down her arms and ribs. "Clara, answer me. Are you hit?" "I don't think so," she stammered. Her hands were shaking so hard she couldn't clasp them together. "You're bleeding." Lorenzo ignored the cut on his face. "Just a scratch. The Sartinis moved faster than I anticipated. They must have a rat on the inside to know the security codes for the window glazing." The elevator dinged as it reached the garage level, 70 floors down in under a minute. "Stay behind me," Lorenzo ordered. He raised the Desert Eagle, the gold barrel glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights of the parking garage. They stepped out. The garage was a cavern of concrete and shadows. Lorenzo's fleet of cars was parked in a row. A Ferrari, a Lamborghini, the Escalade. But Lorenzo ran past them all, heading for a dusty, nondescript grey sedan in the corner. "The tank?" Clara asked, confused, pointing at the armoured Escalade. "Too obvious. It'll be rigged," Lorenzo said. He unlocked the grey sedan, a souped-up armoured Chevy, and threw the door open for her. "Get in." As Clara dove into the passenger seat, the tires of a van squealed at the far end of the garage. Automatic gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off the concrete pillars. Lorenzo slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and threw the car into reverse. He didn't just back up, he slammed the gas, swinging the heavy sedan around in a perfect J-turn. "Put your head down!" Clara ducked as the back window spiderwebbed from a spray of bullets. The glass didn't shatter. It was bulletproof. Lorenzo floored it. The engine roared like a beast, and the sedan shot forward, heading straight for the van, blocking the exit. "You're going to hit them!" Clara yelled. "That's the point!" Lorenzo gritted out. Crunch. The sedan slammed into the side of the van with the force of a wrecking ball. Metal screamed, glass flew, and the van was shoved aside just enough for them to scrape through. Lorenzo didn't let up on the gas. They burst out of the garage and onto 57th Street, merging aggressively into the rainy night traffic. For 20 minutes, Lorenzo drove like a man possessed, weaving through taxis and running red lights until they were deep in the labyrinth of the Queens Midtown Tunnel. Only then did he slow down to a normal speed, blending in with the traffic. Clara slowly sat up. She felt sick. Her hands were gripping the dashboard so hard her knuckles were white. "Where are we going?" she whispered. "A safe house," Lorenzo said. His eyes were constantly checking the rearview mirror. "Off the grid. No phones, no internet, no signals." "I need to call Maya." "You can't. They can track the signal." Lorenzo reached into the center console and pulled out a burner phone. He dialed a number, spoke one word, "status," and listened. He hung up and tossed the phone into her lap. "Silas has her. She's safe. They are at the secondary location in Jersey. They'll be waiting for us." Clara let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. She looked at Lorenzo. He was gripping the steering wheel so tight the leather creaked. Blood was dripping from his jaw onto his white shirt, staining the expensive fabric crimson. "You saved my life," Clara said softly. Lorenzo glanced at her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, hard exhaustion. "You're an investment, Clara. I protect my investments." "Is that all I am?" Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. He looked back at the road. "You're the only person who didn't scream," he said quietly. "Back in the penthouse. You were scared, but you didn't freeze. You moved." "I grew up in Hell's Kitchen, Lorenzo. I know the sound of a drive-by." "Good," Lorenzo said, "because until this is over, you're going to need those instincts." They drove for another hour, leaving the city behind. The concrete jungle gave way to trees and dark, winding roads. They arrived at a secluded estate, surrounded by high walls and dense forest. The gate opened automatically, and they pulled up to a stone mansion that looked more like a fortress. Inside, the house was cold, but safe. Silas was there, standing in the foyer, and behind him, sitting on a velvet sofa with a confused expression, was Maya. "Clara!" Maya shouted, jumping up. She was 16, frail but spirited, with the same dark eyes as her sister. Clara ran to her, hugging her tightly. She checked her over. No scratches, no bruises. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" "This giant guy just picked me up from algebra and put me in a limo," Maya said, eyeing Silas. "He bought me a Happy Meal." "What is going on, Clara? Who are these people?" Clara pulled back. She looked at Lorenzo, who was standing by the door, bleeding and watching them with an unreadable expression. "Maya," Clara said, taking a deep breath. "This is Lorenzo Moretti. He's my fiancé." Maya's jaw dropped. "The guy from the news? The billionaire? You're marrying him?" "It's complicated," Clara said. "But we have to stay here for a while. Is that okay?" Maya looked at the mansion, then at the handsome, dangerous man by the door, and finally at her sister. "Does this mean we have health insurance now?" Clara let out a choked laugh. Yeah, it does." Lorenzo stepped forward. "Silas, show the girl to the East Wing. She has everything she needs. Food, games, medical supplies." Silas nodded. "Come on, kid." Once they were gone, Clara turned to Lorenzo. The adrenaline had worn off completely now, leaving her knees weak. She looked at the blood on his shirt. "Sit down," she ordered. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" "You're bleeding all over the floor. Sit down. I'm going to stitch you up." "I have doctors on call. You said no phones, no signals. That means no doctors coming in and out," Clara argued. She walked to the bathroom she had spotted earlier and grabbed the first aid kit. She came back, her face set in determination. "Sit." Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he obeyed. He sat on the coffee table, unbuttoning his ruined shirt and letting it fall to his waist. Clara tried not to stare. His torso was a map of violence. Scars from knives, bullets, and burns marred the tanned skin. But the fresh wound was a jagged gash on his shoulder where the glass had sliced him. She cleaned the wound with alcohol. Lorenzo didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. He just watched her face. "You have good hands," he murmured as she threaded the needle. "I used to sew my own clothes," Clara said, focusing on the skin. "And Dad used to come home in bad shape sometimes. We couldn't go to the hospital. Questions." "I know the feeling," Lorenzo said. Clara pushed the needle through his skin. He tensed, his muscles rippling under her fingers, but he made no sound. "Why me, Lorenzo?" she asked softly, tying off the first stitch. "Really? There are 1,000 women who would kill to be in this position. Those women want the money, or the power," Lorenzo said. His eyes were locked on hers, intense and searching. "You looked at me with contempt. You turned your back on me to help an old lady. You have a moral compass, Clara. In my world, that is a rare and dangerous thing. I need someone who won't stab me in the back the moment I turn around." "I might stab you if you keep being rude to waitresses," she muttered. Lorenzo chuckled. It was a genuine sound this time, low and husky. He reached up with his uninjured hand and caught her wrist. Clara froze. His thumb traced the pulse point on her inner wrist. "We have to make this look real," Lorenzo whispered. "The wedding is in 3 days. The Sartinis will be there. The world will be watching. If they smell a lie, they will kill us both." I can act, Clara said, her breath catching in her throat. It can't be acting, Lorenzo said. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. You have to believe it. You have to believe you belong to me. He didn't kiss her. He just held her gaze until Clara felt like she was burning up from the inside out. Then he let go. Finish the stitches, he said gruffly. We have a war to plan. 3 days later, Clara Vance ceased to exist. In her place stood Clara Moretti. The transformation had been grueling. A team of stylists had descended on the safe house, armed with silk, diamonds, and judgment. They had waxed, polished, and painted her until she shone like a new coin. But it was the dress that changed her. It was a custom Vera Wang, white silk that hugged every curve of her body before flaring out at the floor. The back was open, exposing her spine. It was elegant, expensive, and armored. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom of the safe house. Lorenzo walked in. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. He stopped dead when he saw her. For a moment, the mask slipped. The cold Mafia don vanished, and a man stood there, struck dumb by his bride. You look, he started, then cleared his throat. Adequate. Clara smirked, turning to face him. Careful, Mr. Moretti. That almost sounded like a compliment. Lorenzo walked over to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a necklace, a string of diamonds with a sapphire the size of a quail egg in the center. The Moretti heirloom, he said, stepping behind her to clasp it around her neck. His fingers lingered on her bare skin, sending shivers down her spine. My mother wore this, and her mother before her. It's heavy, Clara whispered, touching the cold stone. The weight of the crown, Lorenzo murmured against her ear. Are you ready? No. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. They took a helicopter to the city. The venue was the Plaza Hotel, rented out entirely for the engagement gala of the century. It was a power move. Lorenzo was showing the Sartinis that their attack had failed, that he was strong, happy, and untouched. The ballroom was a sea of sharks in tuxedos. Every major crime family in the tri-state area was represented. Politicians drank champagne with murderers. Judges laughed at jokes made by racketeers. When Lorenzo and Clara appeared at the top of the grand staircase, the room went silent. Lorenzo offered her his arm. Smile, he whispered. Like you know a secret that could ruin them. Clara took his arm. She didn't just smile, she beamed. She channeled every ounce of defiance she had ever felt toward rude customers, landlords, and fate itself. She descended the stairs like a queen. They circulated the room. Lorenzo introduced her to men with cold eyes and warm handshakes. Clara played her part perfectly. She was charming, witty, and clung to Lorenzo's arm as if he was the sun and she was a planet in his orbit. Then the Sartinis arrived. Marco Sartini was an older man, rotund and smiling, with eyes like a dead fish. He was accompanied by his son, Luca, the one Clara suspected had ordered the hit. Lorenzo! Marco boomed, spreading his arms. And the lovely bride. We were so shocked to hear of your sudden nuptials. Love waits for no one, Marco, Lorenzo said smoothly, his hand tightening protectively on Clara's waist. Indeed, Marco said, his eyes sliding over Clara. A waitress, I hear. From the Obsidian. A manager, Clara corrected instantly, her voice sweet as honey but sharp as a razor. And before that, I was studying psychology. It's fascinating, really. You learn to spot the sociopaths in the room very quickly. She held Marco's gaze. The old man's smile faltered. Lorenzo suppressed a laugh. Charming, Marco grunted. Enjoy the night, Lorenzo. It might be short. As the Sartinis walked away, Lorenzo leaned down. You just threatened the head of the 5 families. He started it, Clara whispered. I think I'm falling in lust with you, Lorenzo said. Dance with me, Clara replied, her heart pounding. They moved to the dance floor. The orchestra played a waltz. For a few minutes, the danger faded. It was just Clara and Lorenzo spinning under the crystal chandeliers. He held her close, his hand warm on her back. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she wondered if this fake marriage could be something more. There was a connection there, a tether of shared trauma and mutual respect. But the fairy tale shattered with a vibration in Lorenzo's pocket. He pulled back slightly, checking his phone. His face went grey. The warmth evaporated from his eyes, replaced by a glacial fury. What is it? Clara asked, sensing the shift. Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her. But this time there was no lust, no respect, only suspicion. My private accounts, he whispered, his voice shaking with rage. The ones that pay the judges, the ones that keep the police off our backs, they've been drained. What? Clara gasped. How? Only 2 people had the access codes, Lorenzo said. Me. And the person I added to the trust this morning to make the marriage look legitimate. Clara felt the blood drain from her face. Lorenzo, no, I didn't. We are the only ones who knew the passkey was the date of our meeting, Lorenzo hissed, his grip on her waist turning painful. Boss, a voice said behind them. It was Matteo, Lorenzo's consigliere, a man Clara had only met briefly. He looked grave. We traced the transfer. The IP address came from the safe house, from an iPad registered to Clara's sister. Clara recoiled as if slapped. That's a lie. Maya was playing Minecraft. She doesn't know anything about banking. Lorenzo let go of her. He took a step back. The circle of space around them grew as people sensed the tension. The music seemed to warp and slow down. Lorenzo, look at me, Clara pleaded, reaching for him. I didn't do this. Someone is setting me up. The money went to an offshore account linked to the Sartinis, Matteo added, holding up a tablet. It looks like your wife just sold you out for a retirement fund, boss. The room was watching. The Sartinis were watching from the bar, smirking. Lorenzo looked at the Sartinis, then at Matteo, and finally at Clara. His eyes were dead. The connection they had built, the trust stitched together with blood and thread, snapped. I told you, Lorenzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. I knew you were too good to be true. Lorenzo, please, Silas, Lorenzo barked. The security chief appeared instantly. Take her to the basement, Lorenzo ordered, turning his back on her. And find her sister. No one leaves until I get my money back, or until I get a confession. Lorenzo, Clara screamed as Silas grabbed her arm. You're making a mistake. It's a trap. But Lorenzo didn't turn around. He walked toward the bar, pouring himself a drink, while his wife was dragged out of the ballroom, her white dress catching on the floor, leaving a trail of silk like a ghost in her wake. Clara was thrown into the back of a van. But this time, it wasn't a rescue. It was a capture. As the doors slammed shut, plunging her into darkness, she realized the truth. The danger wasn't the Sartinis. The danger wasn't the sniper. The danger was falling in love with a man who had no heart to give. And now, she had to survive him. The basement of the Moretti estate was a stark contrast to the opulence of the ballroom above. It was a renovated wine cellar, but the wine racks had been pushed aside to make room for a metal table and 2 chairs. The air was damp, smelling of mold and old vinegar. Clara sat on one of the metal chairs. She was still wearing her wedding dress, but the hem was now stained with grease and dirt from the van floor. Her hands were not tied. Lorenzo wasn't that barbaric with women, but the heavy steel door was locked from the outside. She wasn't crying. She was past tears. She was in a cold, calculating state of shock. Her mind replayed the events of the last hour. The accusation, the iPad, Matteo. The name stuck in her mind like a splinter. The heavy iron bolt slid back with a clang that echoed off the stone walls. The door creaked open. Lorenzo entered. He had removed his tuxedo jacket and unbuttoned his collar. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were burning with a manic intensity. He carried a bottle of water and a tablet. He slammed the water onto the table, the noise making Clara flinch. "Drink," he commanded. "I don't need you passing out." Clara looked at the water, then at him. "I'm not thirsty. I'm innocent." "The evidence says otherwise," Lorenzo said, pacing the small room like a caged tiger. $30 million moved in 3 seconds. The authorization came from your sister's device, the device I gave you to keep her entertained. "The device Matteo gave her," Clara corrected sharply. Lorenzo stopped pacing. He turned to her slowly. "What did you say?" "I didn't set up the iPad," Clara said, her voice gaining strength. "I don't know the Wi-Fi password to the safe house. I don't know your encryption keys. When we got to the safe house, your consigliere, Matteo, gave the iPad to Maya. He said he had preloaded it with games so she wouldn't be bored." Lorenzo narrowed his eyes. "Matteo has been with me for 10 years. He took a bullet for my father. You've been with me for 3 days. And in those 3 days, I've learned that loyalty in your world is bought, not earned," Clara shot back. "Think about it, Lorenzo. You're the genius businessman. Look at the timing. The Sartinis attacked the penthouse minutes after I agreed to the deal. How did they know I was there? How did they know about the window glazing codes?" Lorenzo went still. The gears in his mind were turning, grinding against his preconceived notions. "And tonight," Clara continued, standing up and ignoring the way her dress pooled heavily around her. "The money moved right when the Sartinis arrived. It was a signal. The money wasn't just stolen, it was the payment for your head." Lorenzo looked at the tablet in his hand. He swiped through the data logs. "The IP address is confirmed. It matches the iPad." "Look deeper," Clara urged, stepping closer to him, invading his personal space. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. If she was going to die, she would die fighting for the truth. "Check the outgoing packets. If Maya was playing a game, the data usage would be consistent. But if it was a hack, there would be a massive spike in upload speed for a split second. A background script." Lorenzo hesitated. He looked at her, seeing the desperation and the fierce intelligence in her eyes. He tapped the screen, pulling up the raw network diagnostics. He scrolled, and then he froze. There it was. A singular, massive data spike at 9:02 p.m. "It was a rootkit," Lorenzo whispered, his face losing all color. "An automated script triggered remotely. Maya didn't send the money. The iPad did it automatically once it connected to the secure network." "And who had access to the iPad before Maya?" Clara asked softly. "Matteo," Lorenzo breathed. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back, leaning against the cold stone wall. "He's the rat. He's been the rat the whole time. He fed the Sartinis the info on the penthouse. He set you up to take the fall so I would be distracted." He looked up at Clara, horror dawning on his face. "I sent him to get Maya. I told him to bring her here for questioning." Clara screamed. "He's going to kill her." "No," Lorenzo said, his voice turning into a growl of pure animal rage. "He's going to use her as a hostage to get out of the building, but he won't get far." Lorenzo reached for his radio on his belt. "Silas, Sector 4. Secure the girl. Matteo is the hostel. I repeat, Matteo is the... Boom! A massive explosion shook the foundation of the estate. Dust rained down from the ceiling. The lights flickered and died, plunging the basement into pitch blackness. The generator, Lorenzo hissed in the dark. They just blew the main power. The emergency red lights kicked on, bathing the room in a bloody glow. They're here, Lorenzo said, grabbing Clara's hand. The Sartinis aren't just at the party. They have a hit squad outside. Matteo just opened the gates. He pulled his gun, checking the chamber. Then he looked at Clara. I'm so sorry. Apologize later, Clara said, ripping the long train off her dress to free her legs. She kicked off her heels, standing barefoot on the cold concrete. Right now, give me a weapon. Lorenzo looked at her. This waitress who served coffee to sharks, this woman who defied him, this wife who was now his only ally. He reached into his ankle holster and pulled out a backup knife, a 6-inch tactical blade. He handed it to her. Don't hesitate. Stick it in the soft parts. Neck, underarm, groin. Clara gripped the handle. Her hand was shaking, but her jaw was set. Let's go get my sister. The hallway leading to the ballroom was a war zone, but the real nightmare waited inside. Peeking through the cracked service doors, Clara's blood turned to ice. On the stage, amidst the ruin of the gala, Matteo stood with a gun pressed to Maya's temple. Beside him, Marco Sartini laughed, shouting for Lorenzo to show himself or watch the girl die. Lorenzo prepared to breach, his face a mask of lethal resolve. I have to draw their fire. You'll be cut to ribbons, Clara hissed, gripping his arm. She scanned the kitchen. Steam valves, crates of alcohol, a dumbwaiter. You think in bullets. I think in service. Give me 30 seconds. She didn't wait for permission. Clara grabbed a crate of high-proof vodka, stuffed a rag into a bottle, and lit it. She shoved the makeshift bomb into the dumbwaiter and hit the button for the ballroom stage. When you hear the crash, she whispered, don't miss. On stage, Matteo counted down. 1, 2, crash. The dumbwaiter doors blew open behind them, showering the stage with flaming alcohol and shattered glass. Matteo flinched, shielding his face from the sudden heat. That split second was all Lorenzo needed. He stepped out, his aim steady. Bang! One shot. Matteo crumpled, the gun falling from his hand. Maya, run! Clara screamed from the balcony. Maya scrambled behind the drum set, just as Lorenzo's men, led by a bloodied Silas, stormed the room to engage Sartini's hit squad. Amidst the chaos, Clara saw Marco Sartini crawling toward the exit like a rat. She didn't think. She moved. She leaped from the balcony, grabbing the heavy velvet stage curtain. She slid down, the fabric burning her palms, and landed barefoot on the stage. Sartini saw her and fumbled for his weapon, but Clara was faster. She grabbed a heavy silver champagne bucket from a toppled table and swung it with all the force of 10 years of hard labor. Clang! The bucket connected with a sickening crunch. Sartini collapsed, dazed. Clara stepped onto his chest, pressing the tip of Lorenzo's tactical knife against his throat. The gunfire died down. Silence reclaimed the room. Lorenzo walked up the steps, stepping over bodies to reach his wife. He looked at Sartini, then at Clara. Finish him, Lorenzo said softly. It's the only way to be sure. Clara looked at the terrifying power in her hands. Then she looked at Maya, shivering behind the drums. No, Clara said, withdrawing the knife. I'm not a murderer, Lorenzo. That's your job. She stepped back, grabbing her sister's hand. I'm taking her to the car. Clean up your mess. Clara walked away without looking back. Behind her, she heard Lorenzo speak one final word to the rival Don. Then, a single gunshot rang out. Lorenzo Moretti didn't believe in mercy. The new contract 1 week later, the Obsidian Lounge was closed for a private meeting. Clara sat in the VIP booth, wearing a tailored black dress that screamed authority. Lorenzo sat opposite her, looking weary. He slid a thick envelope across the mahogany table. "The Sartini territories have been absorbed," he said quietly. "The threat is gone. And so is your debt. This envelope contains the annulment papers and $5 million. You're free, Clara." Clara stared at the envelope. It was everything she had wanted. Safety for Maya, financial freedom, an exit. Lorenzo was giving her an out because he cared enough to let her go. She looked at him, the lonely king on his throne of ash. She realized that running away would only lead back to a life of fear. Here she had power. Here she was respected. Clara picked up the envelope and tore it in half. Lorenzo's eyes widened. "Clara, be rational. You don't belong in the dark." "Maybe not," she said, leaning forward. "But I realized something. You need someone who isn't afraid to tell you no. You need a partner, not a subordinate." She reached for the bottle of sparkling water on the table, the same brand she had poured that first night. She filled a crystal glass and slid it toward him. "The contract said 1 year," she whispered, a playful, dangerous smirk touching her lips. "I never break a promise." Lorenzo looked at the glass, then up at her. The coldness in his eyes melted, replaced by a fierce, possessive warmth. He realized he wasn't just acquiring a wife, he was keeping his equal. He picked up the glass, toasting her. "Then stay," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Welcome home, Mrs. Moretti." And that is how a waitress brought the Mafia king to his knees, not with a gun, but with courage. Clara Vance didn't just survive the underworld. She conquered it by staying true to herself. She proved that even in the darkest shadows, a single spark of defiance can burn down an empire. If you loved this story of danger, betrayal, and romance, please hit that like button. It helps us create more stories like this. Share this video with a friend who loves a strong heroine, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next chapter. What would you have done in Clara's shoes? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.